And hey, I'm Oskari, CEO and founder of Ivan, the trusted open source data platform for everyone. Today, I'll be in discussion with Brian Wagner, who's kindly agreed to share his leadership insights with us. Brian is the CTO of Revenir AI, partnering with banks, fintechs, and governments to automate tax reclaim. Brian started his career as a software engineer in the US before joining AWS in Berlin, and now most recently taking on a CTO role in the UK. Welcome, Brian. Really good to have you here. Join us today.
Hi, thank you so much. It's good to be here.
So we'll have a discussion around the your role, cybersecurity, regulatory landscape, and all that. But before we get started, it would be really great to hear from you. How did you get into this market and this position, and a little bit about your journey?
Sure. Sure. My journey is sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy for myself. I mean, I started professionally developing software when I was very young, like 15, 16, and professionally as in like building things that people would pay for it. And back then it was Microsoft Access. That will certainly date myself. I'll certainly age myself there. But I learned a lot back then about building software, and it's what I learned is that it's less about the actual technology. It's more about what the technology does for the people that you're building it for. So that kind of principle, I chased that principle no matter what my role was or what company I was working for. You know, I didn't see myself as an engineer. I've always seen myself as a problem solver. Fast forwarding through my career as an engineer into solutions architecture at AWS, which turned into security, everything at AWS and the same principle. That's what people needed. You know, I started AWS in 2013. It was not a household name, especially in Europe, especially in Germany at the time. And most of the questions were around, how safe is this? How, this is so new. What risks are we facing? So I really quickly learned that is exactly what people need to hear. They need to adopt technology very, very safely. And then that's put me to where I am now, which, as you said in my intro, I'm working in a space that our customers are regulated. We are not regulated, but having a security mindset, but building products that people need, it's a great fusion of those two skill sets. So we're building things that are, like I say, people want them, but they're also safe to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very interesting take, and I really love what you said about not just creating more software, but actually solving problems and addressing people's needs. That's ultimately what we're all here to do, right? So going to kind of your current work and the industry and the where you are present, so a very rapidly evolving regulatory landscape, I guess we could say.
Right.
So how do you see organizations proactively align their security and compliance strategies with the broader industry trends to empower teams and to maintain a leading role in this field?
Sure. I think in the regulatory space, it's an interesting place to be on the kind of the other side of regulation, or our side, my side of regulation, where we do have to satisfy our customers who are regulated, that means we ultimately have to satisfy those regulators. And if you think about, if you really understand what a regulator in any regulated industry is trying to do, we're in financial services, but health services, that's another like a huge one that's heavily regulated. The job of the regulator, the role of the regulator is to keep the industry that they regulate safe to use. They avoid things like concentration risk. What if every single bank in the UK or in Europe or any jurisdiction, we're all in the same provider? That's a huge risk to that industry if something were to happen to that provider. So I guess the point I'm trying to make, and we're probably going to have this as a theme throughout our conversation today, is understanding risk. So yes, things are absolutely changing, but I think a lot of companies tend to focus on ticking the boxes of compliance or doing what is required from a security point of view. But if you empathize with your market, you empathize with your customers and say, what risks could this customer face if they were to adopt my service or my software? And thinking about it from that point of view, it's a working backwards concept, which is a big Amazonian concept. Ian will tell you the same. It's what risk could they face or could they perceive that they face by using our product? and building in those mitigations and giving the assurance that your data is safe with us. So it's not even just about ticking those boxes, but it's really giving the confidence to that customer, to everybody in that market, that you're doing things the right way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense, and I really like the Amazon way of like working backwards from, and I think that's something that a lot of startups and scale-ups need to really think about, because often when you're starting to build something new, certainly for us at Ivan, when we started the building, it was so obvious for us what to do like next week, what to do tomorrow, but we also have to think about like where are we actually heading, and a really good way to do that is to really understand where do we want to be, where should we be, and then what's the journey from there to here.
Yeah.
But so on the compliance and regulation, like those are topics that I don't think we talk about that much in our industry. We often talk about security and cybersecurity as a kind of big overarching concept for things, and that continues to be a focal point, I suppose, for businesses worldwide. So how do you what's your vision around that? Like how can leaders leverage security and compliance practices to not only just meet the requirements and tick the boxes as you said, but also to help us set industry standards and inspire others to follow suit. So we can really become agents of change, if you will.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this actually the last few days, if I'm honest. And I think there are so many different ways to answer that, but the way I would like to answer that is it's a tricky line. It's a fine line to walk, because I believe that security, not so much compliance, but security is, or at least can be, a differentiator for one company to the next. So if you're doing it right. So on one hand, you've got this competitive edge if you're doing security right. But on the other hand, and this is really what I wanted to kind of focus on, is if you've ever been to a security conference, Black Hat or anything, even Black Hat's kind of the pinnacle, but even like local B-sides, meetups and things like that, the security community is incredibly social amongst each other. And the reason I'm raising that is, in answering to your question actually, is I think the way we can sort of stay, in front of risks and compliance and regulation is to share best practices, or create best practices if they don't exist. Hey, I have this challenge in my business. How are you solving that challenge? And like I say, the fine line though is you don't want to necessarily, if you're talking to a competitor, they don't want to necessarily give you a competitive edge. But again, just if you kind of abstract that, and like I say, you join a security conference, you'll be maybe hopefully not pleasantly surprised, but you may find that everyone is incredibly willing to share, because really security is very much a dark art. It's not scientific. It is to a point, but it is the ultimate variable is going to be users, and users are unpredictable. So being able to share those things with each other, we're going to all go back to our respective companies and take those learnings back, and we're all going to build better, safer products.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe I've seen that kind of collaborative nature of the security industry, and before starting Ivan, I also used to work in cybersecurity for quite some time, and it's of course a really really cool and interesting community where there's a lot of sharing and collaboration. But I think a lot of people also face this kind of uneasy feeling when when you're succeeding, most people don't really notice you, but whenever you fail at something, then it's suddenly super visible and immediately obvious to people and all that. Do you have any insights on that? Like how do you kind of make sure that others also see the success that we're having in these communities?
Yeah, that's a good point. Everyone does notice when something like that certainly fails. I think success, though, celebrating those successes or highlighting those successes, I would say is exactly what I was talking about as far as going out and sharing, or if you're in a sales scenario for your product, which may not be a security focused product like Revenir, for example, leading that conversation with, by the way, here's what we're doing to protect the data. Like, here's the data that we're talking about, and before we even tell you about the service we're going to provide, here's the how we're going to protect that data. So, I mean, maybe not quite that literally. I don't know if that makes for a great sales conversation, but I guess my point is, whether it's in a sales scenario or again, me working, as a CTO for a financial services company effectively, but going to those cybersecurity events or those security events and talking about how we are, handling our own security, that is a major celebration of success. To be able to get out on a stage or on a platform and say, here's what we're doing and it's working great for us, and we're also, really interested in collaborating to make it even better.
Very cool, very cool. So I think over the past 12 months, the biggest thing that everybody's been talking about has been AI. And we're seeing significant advancements in artificial intelligence all around. Like, AI has been, of course, a big trend and a thing that everybody's been talking about for a long time, but now it's more and more obvious and concrete to so many of us. So how do you personally perceive the interplay between AI and your industry's trajectory, particularly concerning security and compliance?
Yeah, and I think what I'll say too, I think it is even broader than my own industry. I think one of the common threads about security in any technical industry, any industry at all, is kind of being able to detect what's abnormal, right? So kind of rule number one of security is just eyes everywhere, right? Log everything. Storage is cheap now. With cloud services, it's super easy to log everything and turn everything on. Because what that gives you when things are going well is a baseline, right? You know what normal looks like. You know that you're going to get an influx of traffic, from your remote users at certain times of the day, depending on their time zones. And, and conversely, you get that same user logging in from a different IP address in a different country at a different hour. Those are the kind of things that are, sort of raise suspicion. But taking that at scale, where AI is going to come into play it has been for a while, in fact, is AI is really, really good at detecting those little patterns, or the opposite is when you're flooded with alert overload and you don't know where to start. AI is really, really good at solving that problem. We humans are only as good as our dashboard in that sense, right? If you're ever in a SOC and you rely on your dashboards and everything is flatlined except for this thing right here. Well, we need to zoom in on that time and understand what happened between here and here. Yeah. But like I say, AI is really, really good at that. And even now when we're talking about generative AI, I would expect the security industry to leverage that data, say, we found this information. Now, AI, tell me how we can avoid that in the first place, right? What changes can we make to our infrastructure to flatten that curve, as it were?
So in many ways, I think you're talking about like supercharged pattern recognition that you can apply in these use cases. Are there any other specific applications within AI that you believe could have a profound impact on an organization's operational efficiency and overall ability to maintain compliance and really to be a pioneer in this industry?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I guess my example was certainly focused on, detecting threats as they arise, but going, looking after sort of on the horizon of security or compliance even, is absolutely that, right? Feeding it the rules. Compliance is effectively a set of rules. Sometimes it's governed by the compliance body. Sometimes they're interpreted by the organization, whatever that may be. But like I say, AI is really, really good at following and carrying out instructions or finding ways to carry out those instructions. So I think constantly, updating your whatever your control framework is to cover all the different compliance regimes out there, feeding that into your AI system, I would hope, or should. And if it does, then if someone's watching this and has a product that does that, please give me a call. But it can, it would, like I say, sort of proactively understand, if it's got some understanding of your architecture, understanding of your service, to kind of proactively either fix it or at least tell me about it and say, hey, look, you've told me that this is the rule that you're trying to uphold. I'm telling you that over here, these two things don't meet up, and these are the things that I'd like to recommend. So going back to that proactivity and keeping things as safe as possible before we get to that scenario where we're investigating a spike in whatever the user behavior is.
So what about looking forward into the future, anticipating future challenges and opportunities? Like, are there some emerging trends in security and compliance that you believe will be critical for organizations to address in the next 5 to 10 year time frame, and how to best position ourselves to address those?
Sure. I think it's certainly not a new trend or concept, but I think it's becoming more important as we go from a sort of a traditional data center lifestyle to now everything is a service, and that would be identity and in access management. In security in general, the human is always the weakest link, right? And it's not because we're not intelligent. Even the most aware security professionals, have fallen to a phishing scheme at some point, right? I'm guilty, right? I built a career in cybersecurity and I've been phished before, right? But it's the users that are always the weakest link. So the way you mitigate that is correct access management, right? Now that becomes a lot harder when everything we have now is a service, right? We're using Slack, we're using AWS, we're using Ivan, we're using, imagine all these different services, all of them are associated with identities, right? I have a login, my engineers have a login, and so on and so forth, and roles and access and all of that. So getting that right is, I think, absolutely will never stop being the most important thing. Right now, it was 5 years ago, 5 years ahead of now, all of it, it's going to be more and more relevant, but it is going to get harder and harder, again, as everything becomes service-based. And there are ways to solve that. We can even solve that with AI, which I know wasn't really the question, but let's think about just-in-time permissions. Let's think about just-in-time access. Can we ask an AI if this person has the right to be there from this time? Why are they here? Are you following a support ticket? Have you been asked by your superior? Whatever. There's so many ways we can improve on access management that we haven't addressed yet.
Yeah, makes sense. Something you touched on earlier, and very interesting and important for us is of course the open source communities and open source technologies and open source projects. Everything we make available for our customers and users at Ivan is based on open source technologies. So how do you see yourself, the interplay between open source software and cybersecurity? What role will open source software have in shaping the future of secure digital environments?
Yeah, I think that is a manifestation of what we talked about before, as far as collaborating and the security community collaborating with each other. It's one thing to go to a conference and talk about best practices or some sort of meetup, which those are incredibly valuable. I love those. But the really most ultimate form of collaboration is open source in this way, right? I'm in a different industry than yourself or than somebody else that I've met at a security conference, but we have similar principles on what we think, about identity and access management or about, firewalls or what have you. And to be able to kind of to create our own standards or create our own best practices, ours as in the community of security, and apply those across the board. Like I say, those manifests exactly in open source to say, I can collaborate on this, you can collaborate on this. You put something out there that enforces these rules. Well, I've got these rules that I actually created above and beyond that. I want to give those back. And that way, like I said before, if we're all using, these same concepts, then we're all building better and safer products. I'm a consumer as well, right? I might be a CTO, it might work for a company, and I want people to use our services, but I also consume, in my personal life, these services that I would hope that they are employing security best practices in my friends and my family. And, you want everyone to be safe. So I love the idea of giving back, and I love the idea of collaborating on open source and sharing that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think with the emergence of the cloud services like ours and of course AWS and Google Cloud and Azure and so forth, we've made open source technologies not just available to more people, but also accessible to a lot more people. And it's a great collaborative environment. Of course, sometimes we're competing with each other, like you said about the security professionals and security communities, but we're also collaborating on making these technologies better for everyone. And that's, I think, something that's really, really a great part of the industries that we are operating in. Yeah. Kind of on that track, so fostering innovation, can you share any insights from your side into how organizations encourage a culture of innovation in security and compliance, empowering teams to think beyond conventional boundaries and to act as leading businesses to drive meaningful transformation.
Absolutely. I think it's a principle of any kind of software or technology sort of leadership is to make sure that everybody that contributes, so engineers and managers and architects and things like that, that everybody understands the common goal, in particular of the business. It's really easy to say, here's this project or here's this GitHub repository and these issues and Jira or whatever, and you ask your specialist engineer in that technology to go and build it, and people are happy to do that. But I think what's far more meaningful, even within and without security, is why are we building this, right? What impact does this pull request have on the business? Now, applying that to security, you've been in the security industry sort of as a focus, and so have I, and there's so many others that have. Security absolutely is a differentiating factor it's a competitive edge, right? Security, the embedding security in the engineering process enables business growth, because business growth is not without taking on risks. You absolutely, to grow, you absolutely will take on risk. And as we said at the beginning, like, risk is kind of the common language here. So if I can kind of retrace those steps and connect those dots, like I say, empowering your technical teams to understand where the business is going and embedding those security principles at the beginning of the development process will allow growth to happen so much faster. And again, it's going back as an individual contributor. You're saying, this thing that I did here, it has positively impacted the business. We know we're going to grow. We can enter this market, or we can increase our volume or whatever. But connecting all those dots is absolutely paramount to foster that innovation. Because then people will say, "Oh, I've got this idea. This is the problem we are trying to solve as a business. I've done this. In my previous role. I'd like to, try this out here." Like, people feel that sense of ownership, and getting that security first culture will absolutely foster exactly what you're talking about, innovating on security.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That was really, really interesting insights. And that's, I think, what all of us as leaders grapple with, like how to balance risk with innovation, with change, and challenging and changing the status quo. Because of course, as we're building new businesses, we're out there to prove that there's a better way to build things than what we were used to, and that doesn't come without risk and doesn't come without challenges, for sure. Yeah. So, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. Before we wrap, I have a couple more quick questions that I thought I'd ask you if you're open to that.
Okay. Sure, let's do it.
Okay. So if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be? And what is the first question you'd ask them?
This might not be an obvious one, but I would probably want to sit down with Ramses, the Pharaoh Ramses, because I really want to understand more, like the pyramids. Like, hey, what's going on with the pyramids? Why are those so huge? And how on earth did you logistically arrange that? And I don't think I'm going to like the answer from a humanitarian point of view, but if I think about building something as big and complex as a pyramid, but of course applying it to my world today, like, I don't how many. I look at my org chart. What was Ramsey's org chart like? How did he accomplish that? Right. So I would love. Yeah. I think that would be quite fascinating to understand that. To be honest.
Yeah, that's a cool thought, and really build something to last thousands of years, I suppose.
Exactly.
So, following on. So, what's the most unusual food you've ever tried, and did you like it?
Yes. This is the easiest one for me to answer, I got to say, for random questions, because without a doubt, the most unusual food I've ever tried would be durian pizza.
No,
I'm very so durian fruit, of course, is a regional thing. So there are plenty of people that enjoy durian. So with respect to everyone that enjoys durian fruit, that's not what this is about. But when you if you're not familiar, by the way, for anyone watching or yourself, Oskari.
Acquired taste.
Yeah, it's an acquired taste, because without a doubt, whether you like it or not, it has a smell. It is a very pungent smell, and I didn't grow up around it, so for me, it's a very surprising smell. But when you take that smell and you heat it up with melted cheese, it takes on a completely different form. So there was a group of us in Singapore, in Sentosa Island in Singapore, and there was a place advertising durian pizza. And the group of us decided, we're going to try this. We're going to try durian pizza. So I think there was 6 of us. We ordered one small pizza. Only one of us was able to actually eat a piece of pizza. And I think we washed it down with some peanut butter covered chips, which was also probably a poor choice. But that is by far the most unusual food I've eaten. Did I like it? I'm sorry to say I did not like it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, sorry to hear that, but I guess next time I'm in Southeast Asia, I'll have to give it a try.
Give it a try.
All right. And finally, so what is the last book you read or movie you watched that you couldn't stop talking about?
Oh, I still can't stop talking about it. So the book is called Mindfuck, and it's by a guy called Christopher Wiley. And Christopher Wiley he's the whistleblower for Cambridge Analytica. So if you remember a few years back, there was a big lawsuit investigation into Cambridge Analytica, who was basically an adjunct to Facebook. And I read this years ago, but it's still the number one book for me. And it's not on purpose. It's not on purpose, right on, actually on point with what we've been talking about for these last 20, 25 minutes. It is about what they've done with data and how to manipulate sort of the public opinion. So basically, it's the story of how Cambridge Analytica ingested tremendous amount of Facebook data, which was effectively free to them. There wasn't any like regulations or anything. They basically created these fake apps on the App Store, and just people were just ingesting so much data. And then they took that data and they were able to very reliably predict human behavior that interacted with apps like WhatsApp or Instagram or anything like that. And they were able to basically feed them propaganda, I guess, and to have whatever effect they wanted. So I don't want to give away the whole book, and it gets quite political in nature, and that's not what we're here to discuss. But it is, on principle, though, like it is actually quite terrifying what humans are always the weakest link, right? So if you can manipulate a human, it has profound impact on security, privacy, and even sometimes world events. And I would encourage everyone to read it, even if you're not technical. It has some technical sort of bits about it, but it's much more than that. It's really about, like I say, sort of the human interaction with technology, as opposed to like, how do you build technology?
Yeah, very interesting. I haven't read that, but I'll definitely need to check it out. And I think we can encourage everybody to learn more about like how do we actually interact with the outside world around us. And
yes, safely.
I think that's that very, very interesting. So thanks so much for sharing your insights and thoughts with us today, Brian. It was a great conversation to have with you, and really looking forward to speaking with you again soon.
Great, thank you so much. That was really, really fun.
All right, cool.